After 2 years of hard yards and millions of jabs, we're now closer than ever to a post-pandemic future. A future in which we've been told COVID is like
the flu.
Politicians and some health officials are talking about living with the flu like they want to go back to 2019, live like nothing is happening and that we can just ignore. Like living with means ignoring COVID.
Let's look at the similarities. Both COVID and the flu are contagious respiratory diseases that spread in the same way. They present with many of the same symptoms and both can lead to serious, life-threatening complications. But there is one measure in which COVID decisively stomps all over the flu: death.
Since the start of this year, 48 days, we've had more people die of COVID than we had in the entire pandemic in 2020 and 2021.
In fact, 2019 was considered a really bad flu year for Australia. 902 people died. But just this year, almost 2,600 people have been killed by COVID, and that's with widespread vaccination. However, a new wave of treatments for COVID will tip the odds for surviving the virus further in our favour.
We know we have an effective therapy for COVID, Paxlovid, but it reduces death from COVID substantially and hospitalization. We're expecting 500,000 doses. We don't have it yet. GPs can't prescribe it yet.
But perhaps the single biggest difference between the flu and COVID is that we know a hell of a lot more about the flu.
I mean, we don't even really know what the future with the flu is going to be like from year to year, but at least we have a pretty good idea. We have a couple of 100 years of data, but we have 2 years of data for COVID, and the data that we have seems to indicate it keeps coming back for another bite.
So while COVID might eventually be as manageable as the flu, it's probably not even close right now.
Would I rather get the flu or would I rather get COVID? I think hands down right now, I'd rather get the flu because the flu I understand. My risk of death from the flu at my age is lower than my risk of whatever the next COVID is going to be. We don't know what my risk of death is going to be.
I worry that when we talk about COVID, we focus so much on deaths alone and we don't talk about enough the long-term impacts of COVID. I'm someone who's immunocompromised. I live with complex medical needs every day that trip up my life. And I have friends who have contracted long COVID. You don't want it, guys. It's not just about survival or not survival. It's about what happens in between. I don't feel like that conversation's happening.
So do you think when that we are getting it wrong in terms of this idea of living with COVID? Because, it's pretty clear that people that have lived through these sustained lockdowns, have reached a point of like, I can't really do this again or any longer. So we're kind of faced with this choice, right?
I think we have to find a way to live with that. There's no question at that. But what I would say is that right now, there is a real divide in our community between those who feel healthy, who are vaccinated and who are living their lives as if they're going to be fine, and those who are immunocompromised or elderly who are still nervous, even if they are fully vaccinated and boosted, kind of living a more closeted, careful, cautious life.
Are you doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. Living with COVID doesn't necessarily mean living the way we used to.
And as Nancy Baxter said, we've only got 2 years' worth of information at this stage, so there's still plenty to learn.
There's scary stuff to come.
Yeah.